All right, so tariffs are here. Obviously, that's some pretty large shockwaves through the U.S. stock market and even just the global markets today. Crypto, obviously, getting hammered pretty hard. Silver lining to this, though, is that Bitcoin did actually hold up relatively well. We did see a very, very volatile day, just as expected. But overall, from like a net perspective, it did relatively well. And so I was pretty pleased with that. One thing I was actually looking through the liquidations today as well. Liquidations seem to be relatively low. So I think people were rightly not really, betting too much on, if it was going to pump or if it was going to crash, because we did see some pretty large movements today, but nothing really too crazy. I mean, almost $250 million liquidated, but I mean, from what we've seen recently, that's starting to feel like some pretty small potatoes. So I want to discuss kind of what we're seeing within the market. What is next? I think there's so much to cover in terms of how this could potentially unfold over the next couple months. I think there's a bull case, and I do also think there's a bear case. I'm going to go over both of those. You obviously can decide which. I think there's really, really compelling evidence for both. And so even me myself, I'm having a bit of a difficulty deciding exactly which way it's going to go. And so we're also going to talk about how that's impacting my investment strategy and what I'm planning on doing with this knowledge and with the facts and circumstances that we do have. So anyway, without further ado, let's go on ahead. We'll dive right in. Starting out with crypto bubbles, we can see grass actually the only thing really kind of majorly green today. Cosmos doing all right as well, but otherwise just a lot of red everywhere. You can see some of the previous coins that have been doing relatively well: Hyperliquid, Sui, Barachain, Pi, Walrus, all these going down pretty decently. We can also see Story Protocol. That one is actually behind my picture, but we can see here that one's been doing relatively well recently, also down. We can see Solana also down a decent bit as well. So, I mean, pretty red day overall. This is nothing new. We can see, very red day in the market, just kind of generally everywhere on the past week, month, and year as well. Obviously on the year, we do have a couple of pretty nice green ones here and there, but the market by far is still very, very red. Some things, down crazy amounts. I mean, Optimism down almost 80%, Render 65%, Injective 75%, Caspa 50%, also hidden by my picture. You can see here, WorldCoin almost 90%. I mean, just really, really crazy weakness showing out of some of these altcoins here. And kind of market wide. I mean, it's not like it's just one or two in particular. It is the majority. You are the outlier if you went up over the past year, which does actually seem to indicate that, sticking with Bitcoin is still a good idea, because we are seeing Bitcoin up almost 25% on the year. So moving on, we can look at just a super quick market overview. We can see back in fear, also back down into weak as well. We can see that RSIs are indicating that altcoins continue to get sold off more and more. Same thing over here. This is more Bitcoin specifics. We'll skip over this today. But if you're interested, just pause the video and you can kind of take a look at those a little bit closer. Moving on, though, we can see Bitcoin price specifically. We do have that trade open from obviously way before, when it broke down, which is fine. We're just leaving it. This is why you do stuff on low leverage, is because it gives you time and flexibility that things could maybe come back. Again, we are kind of looking at this being kind of that next key major level of support. We were ranging in here for several months, broke down. Now it appears that we're kind of ranging in here. We'll have to see if we kind of come back up, come back down. Hard to say for sure, but that's kind of what we're looking at least for right now. We could see that we did start to form a little bit of an uptrend. That, of course, did get broken. So we are now kind of continuing along this downtrend. We'll get rid of this so just so we can kind of see what we're looking at a little bit better. Over the past couple of days, this is actually 2 days ago, leading up to the announcement of the tariffs. I guess this technically was the announcement of the tariff, or the day of that. We saw that really strong run up. This obviously appeared to be a fake out. This came all the way right back down, and now we're kind of still leveled up, or kind of leveling out on this zone. You can see here, this has been a pretty decent level of support, kind of between like the 81,000 and like 82,000 range. That's kind of, where we're seeing a lot of support holding up recently. Obviously, we see it, a little bit of a wick here, and then obviously some couple candles here. But otherwise, this has been a pretty strong support, kind of that low 80,000 range. However, we are still unable to break above this descending trend line. And until that happens, of course, probably nothing too crazy going to be going on. However, one really interesting thing to note is this is one of the first times or I guess I should say one of the few times ever that Bitcoin has actually held up better than the stock market, which is really, really interesting. Because if you look on a day-to-day basis, really not a whole lot going on. Yes, of course, a ton of volatility, but from actual price movement, not really too much going on, staying about level to where it has been basically ever since like the 29th of March, and even going back, similar to where it was bouncing around between the 16th to like the 20th of March. So definitely a lot of kind of price stability coming out of Bitcoin lately. Again, we probably will see a break to the upside or the downside here soon. We are starting to see the Bollinger Band squeeze in again. We have not seen them squeeze in too far quite yet, but when we do see them squeeze like this, usually there is a level of volatility coming. Again, which way we don't know for certain, but it's pretty reliable that it usually does happen. So moving on, if you are interested in trading BTCC, I've got WEEX. I also have Phemex in the description below. BTCC is really cool because you can actually trade tokenized stocks as well, which is very cool. Obviously, the stock market has been beaten down pretty hard lately. More on that here in a second. But if you are looking to maybe DCA into some stocks that you've had your eye on for a while, pick them up at a couple percentage point discount. Not too bad, not too bad of a time to get started. Also, WEEX got about $20,000-$30,000 deposit bonuses. BTCC 10% match on your deposits for free. Again, really, really good deal. And then Phemex does have the pilot trading contracts as well as the grid trading bot, which again, grid trading bots, particularly in times where we're just seeing choppiness like this, really, really nice strategy to have. So anyway, if you're interested, links in the description below. Moving on though, I wanted to go over just a couple of quick things here because we've seen here, obviously Michael Saylor, the forever Bitcoin maxi bull. Obviously, nothing new here, but kind of an interesting take here. You can see that Bitcoin is the most volatile because it's the most useful. And his reasoning for that is essentially because Bitcoin trades like a risk asset short term because it's the most liquid, scalable, 24/7 asset on earth. In times of panic, traders sell what they can, not what they want to. Doesn't mean it's correlated long term, just means it's always available. Interesting take here. I'm not sure that I fully agree with that. I do still think that people are trying to figure out exactly what Bitcoin means. I think over the past 12 to 18 months is when people have been trying to figure out what is Bitcoin, right? Because historically, it's, even though people claim it's a store of value, I believe it's a store of value. Realistically, it does kind of trade like a risk asset, right? I mean, when inflation goes up, Bitcoin goes up. When free money goes up, Bitcoin goes up. When recession risk goes up, Bitcoin goes down. Not generally what you would expect for a store of value, right? So that is something that I do think we still kind of need to get past a little bit, but it is a kind of an interesting take because it is always available 24/7, and I do think that is fair that in times of panic, people just sell stuff because they can. Obviously, if the markets are closed, but Bitcoin is perpetually open, it's easier to sell Bitcoin than it is to sell something that's not available to be sold at that point. So something to think about there. The next thing we can see is about $3.1 trillion was erased from the stock market today. Really, really brutal day in the stock market. As I mentioned, stock market, many of these companies actually moving more to the downside than Bitcoin itself did. The NASDAQ, S&P, and Dow, I believe, all moved down more than Bitcoin did as well. So pretty interesting news there. Not very often that happens. So obviously, I think on the day Bitcoin was more volatile, but in terms of net price change, obviously the stock market doing worse than Bitcoin, which is a pretty unusual and pretty interesting event going on there. The last thing I want to take a look at too, and we're going to be going more into kind of what's going on with, kind of the economics, what's going on with tariffs, all of that type of stuff, because I think what's important to note here is what the potential long-term play is, because what we're seeing right now, obviously a ton of panic, a lot of selling, not great for asset prices, but what is essentially happening before our eyes real time, again, we don't exactly know how this is going to play out. I think anybody who is telling you they know how it's going to play out is probably lying to you, just because there's so many crazy things all going on at the same time that it's almost impossible to know for sure how it will play out. But theoretically, essentially the theory behind this is is they're trying to reset global trade, right? The Trump administration is trying to reset global trade. They believe that the US has been treated unfairly in the past with these trade deals. And so their whole take is they're trying to reset global trade and make sure that they get better deals for the US. Now, of course, tariffs are inflationary. This is generally not good for the consumer in the short term. However, there are other things that they're trying to do that are deflationary that could potentially offset tariffs. Taxes being one of those, and then also monetary policy and spending, more importantly, being the other. We do also have the Fed. The Fed has the ability to cut interest rates. The other thing that is very, very important that I do not see people talking about is this could be a short-term strategically beneficial move for the US government, because the US government has $10 trillion of debt that they need to refinance by the end of 2025. So theoretically, this could potentially be a little bit of a navigational move to maybe push the US into a little bit of a recession, or at least into a less optimistic outcome or worldview, because that's going to drop interest rates. Then they can refinance and then change and do whatever they want and try to start to recover the economy, right? However, that one move, while it may cause some short-term pain for most everybody involved, in the long term, this could end up saving the US trillions of dollars. So that is something that should not be overlooked and should be considered when we're discussing how does this potentially impact crypto and the markets and all that type of stuff. The other thing, again, if the markets start to get bad and people get concerned, all that type of stuff, the Fed has the money printer. We know they have it. We know they know how to use it. So that is always the thing that we can kind of potentially come back to and rely on. So just something to think about there. There's a lot going on, a lot of different things in play and in motion right here. So we just have to be careful, don't get too crazy. In terms of my personal strategy of what I'm doing right now, I'm not looking to buy really anything at this point. Anything below probably like 80K for Bitcoin, I'll be interested in probably picking up a little. I'm not going to be backing the truck up or anything like that, just because I do think there is that possibility we could see it go lower. But I'm also I'm kind of happy with my, kind of my asset allocation between stocks and crypto and real estate, all this type of stuff. So for me, it's not a huge deal to, get going and buy as much as I can every time I see, Bitcoin drop 5% or whatever. But in my mind right now, Bitcoin is the only thing I can trust to not do anything too crazy in the short term. And as we can see, alts are getting crushed continually. If this gambit does not play out and we do go into a recession, this is going to be a long 2 or 3 years for alts, right? There's no need to be buying into alts right now to be essentially being a bag holder and watch them go probably down another 50, 70, 80, 90% from here. I know that may sound unbelievable because we've already seen some of them go down 50, 60, 70, 80%, but I do think that could happen again, depending on kind of what happens in the overall market. So just something to think about. It can get worse. I do promise you that. I'm not confident that that's going to happen yet, but I'm always open to all options, right? And so what I'm trying to do is essentially just position myself accordingly so I can, benefit from an upside, and I also am not going to be too damaged from a downside. Obviously, if things skyrocket tomorrow, I will not make as much as I could have if I was 100xing Dogecoin or, GigaChat or whatever, right? I mean, that obviously, but also, if you're wrong, you're going to lose everything, right? And so I'm not in the business of gambling. I'm in the business of investing when it makes the most sense, and the highest reward to the lowest risk is ultimately what I'm looking for. So anyway, hopefully you found the information in this video useful. If you did, a like and a subscribe really, really do help. Also, if you have any comments, thoughts, feelings, whatever, just drop those in the comment section below. I'd love to hear what your guys' feedback is. How are you feeling about this? Do you think, the crypto's over? Do you think we're going to see kind of maybe like that V-shaped recovery that we saw in 2020? Where are you guys at here? I'd love to hear you guys' feedback. Also, if you are interested, I do have that link in the description below to Patreon. If you want to join my Discord, I'm always kind of answering questions, interacting with the community. If anybody has questions on, for example, what could the impact of these tariffs be, or how could this look? A lot of that type of thing. There's a lot, I try and interact with all of that as frequently as I can. Also give some updates, quicker than what I can do when I make a video, a lot of that type of stuff as well. So if you're interested, links in the description below for that as well. So anyway, thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one.